All right, welcome everyone. It is great to see people. My name is Kate Garzón, and I'm the founder of Guided Parenting Support GPS. So I'm a GPS for the parents of toddlers through teens, and I help parents solve frustrating behaviors and raise great humans. And we do that through focusing on relationship building, understanding development, and skill building. So I offer one-to-one coaching with parents, but I also do webinars and seminars and workshops for schools and churches and community organizations and companies that want to support their employee parents. And I also do things like this, which falls under the category of parent education. Parent coaching is very private, very customized. It's a lot of listening, a lot of holding space and asking questions. Parent education is a lot of me talking at you. So buckle up for that. In my coaching practice, I work with the parents of children from toddlers all the way through teens. Just in this past week alone, I've worked with the parents of children from age 2 all the way to 21. Everything from a family in California with 4 adolescent sons to a family in Canada who have twin toddlers and an 8-year-old. So the whole gamut. Frustrating behaviors, school refusal, and motivation, and social media and device usage, and yelling and fighting and chores and sibling stuff, and why won't they listen to me, and why is this not easier, and all of the things in between. But another thing that I do is I spend a little bit of time kind of hanging around in parents groups on Facebook to see what is on people's minds. And the question that comes up over and over and over again is toilet training. This seems to be something that causes a lot of stress for a lot of parents. And that makes me feel really badly because it shouldn't be this hard. And you shouldn't already be super stressed out before your kid is even 2. So, what happens often is like a mom will ask a question and then 35 more parents will all comment and say, well, this is how I did it and this is how I did it. And it's everything from, well, they trained themselves, so I'm no help to you, to my kid is 7 and still sleeps in a pull-up, and everything in between. And so it's tough because there's so much judgment around it. And there's this feeling of shame and this feeling of like, if my kid isn't completely finished toilet training by 2.5, I've somehow failed as a parent. So what I want to do today is lift that pressure off of parents. I'm not here to give you a set of hard and fast rules that you absolutely must follow. And if you don't follow them, you will have ruined your child. That's not the point of today. I'm also not going to give you a set, this is exactly how it needs to happen process. And you'll understand a bit more about why I'm not going to do that when we get a little deeper in. Because there shouldn't be so much stigma around this. It doesn't matter if someone's child is still wearing a pull-up at night when they're 5. It doesn't matter if they still need a pull-up on to poop when they're 4. I promise you, when they are 22 and they're sitting in a bar with their buddies, they are not going to be talking about how old they were when they learned to poo-poo in the potty. Like, I can pretty much guarantee that that's not going to be the case. So, over the past 3 decades, I have supported countless families through the ins and outs of toilet learning. And I have learned a lot about that along the way. The other thing we now have that we didn't have when most of us were being toilet trained and the generations before that, we have so much more information about the brain and the nervous system and what that actually means for how children experience safety and for what that means for the nerves that actually control their digestion and their fight or flight responses and their rest and digest responses. And we're going to get into that as well because it's relevant for how you approach it on the day-to-day with your kids. So whether you are expecting or you are the parent of an infant and you're sort of looking at this on the horizon, whether you are the parent of a toddler who's about to start or is kind of in the thick of it and wondering why it's taking so long, or whether you have a slightly older child and things haven't quite fallen into place the way you'd envisioned, this is the place for you. So sit back and relax and enjoy. Many of you sent questions in ahead of time. So I have incorporated those into the body of the webinar. If you have specific questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will answer them later at the end of the webinar. And I will stop the recording at the end before I answer questions, just to respect everyone's privacy. The body of this presentation is about an hour, but I am happy to stay on for as long as needed afterwards. So I mentioned that I've been working with kids and families for a really long time, and that has informed how I approach every situation in coaching. And it's through the lens of relationship building, understanding development, and skill building. And toilet learning is exactly the same. So the tips that we're focusing on today are going to be about protecting your relationship with your kiddos while you're going through this process and understanding developmentally what's going on for them so that you are less stressed about the whole process, and so are they. And then helping them skill build, because that's really what this is about: physical skills and emotional skills, all tied into those internal sensations. Little disclaimer: I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. So if you have questions about like, what color your kids' poop should be, or how many times a day they should be pooping based on their age and their overall health, I'm not the person to ask. If you have questions, if you are concerned, if there's something going on, if your child is constipated, absolutely consult with their pediatrician. Occupational therapists are also an incredible resource for toilet learning, and we're going to get into that role a little bit as well. Interestingly, I have helped several sets of families, probably more than several, where the parents are physicians. And they understand what to do when things go wrong. What they needed support with was how to kind of make things go right. So that's what I'm bringing to it. So now let's get started with 10 tips for toilet learning success. Feel free to take notes if you'd like to, but I am going to send out a one-pager little cheat sheet with the replay. So the first tip falls under relationship building. And this is one of the most important, and maybe the most important, is to give yourself permission to make a mindset shift. If you think about toilet training as an event and you gear yourself up, okay, we're home for the next 3 days. I've got my M&Ms ready and it's warm enough that they can run around without pants on, and it's going to be messy, but we're going to come out the other side and it's going to be done. You are setting yourself and your child up for a lot of frustration and a lot of disappointment. Anecdotally, you may have heard of children for whom that worked. Those parents were just really lucky. They happened to nail it at exactly the right time, and they happened to have a kid for whom it worked. More often than not, it doesn't. But you don't know if you've hit it at the right time and if you've got the kind of kid for whom it's going to work until it's too late. So if you make a mindset shift and reframe away from toilet training towards toilet learning, it gives you permission to think of it like a process as opposed to an event. Because if you think about it, we do not expect children to go from being completely immobile to running marathons over a 3-day long weekend. We do not expect them to go from silence to full sentences over a 3-day long weekend. We do not expect them to go from being completely fed by breast or bottle to being completely independent and cutting their steak with a knife and fork and asking mommy to please pass the salt in a 3-day weekend. So why is it that we expect that this very complex bodily process is going to be start to finish done in a 3-day long weekend? It's not realistic, and it just sets you all up for stress and pressure and frustration. And I'm going to talk about what that does physiologically to your kids in a little bit. So instead of thinking about it as an event, think of it as this gradual, low stress process of guiding them towards harnessing their natural biological needs. The other thing is that when we adjust how we think about it, when we adjust how we talk about it, we adjust how we think about it. And that adjusts how we feel about it. And that's going to come into play later as well when we talk about the nervous system. So this talking about it differently, thinking about it differently, feeling differently about it, it takes so much of the pressure off. So that's why it's tip number 1, because nothing else is going to work if you're still thinking about it as this like, okay, I'm ready, we're starting, let's do it, okay. The second tip is also relationship-based. Be patient with yourself and be patient with them. Ignore social media, Ignore your judgy sister-in-law. Ignore your mom's well-intentioned, Susie's like, she's 2.5, or maybe you think it's time. She's a little old for diapers. Ignore it. Give yourselves permission to follow your child's lead, to think of this as a process. And through that, you are going to be able to trust them. You're teaching them to trust their own bodies, and you're giving them some autonomy. And I know when they're 2, adolescence seems a really long way off, but the things you put in place now, how you handle this process now, protecting relationships, understanding development, building skills, that gives you practice at parenting throughout life. And when they are teenagers, you are going to be extremely grateful that you did things this way, because it sets your whole family up for success over the lifetime. So another thing about the patience is, once you get to the point where you're ditching the diapers, if it's not working, or if they're really upset, just stop. It's okay. This whole thing about like switching to underwear and never going back, it's unfair, right? When a kid is learning to walk, sometimes they crawl, sometimes they cruise, sometimes they walk, with you holding onto their hands, sometimes they take steps. But once they've taken those steps, it doesn't mean you never expect them to crawl again. You never expect them to go back and do the things that came before. So just give yourself permission to relax a little bit and look at it like this process. The other thing you might want to do is prepare what you want to say to people in advance. So Thanksgiving's coming up. You're going to be with your family. Your mother-in-law is going to be looking at you and saying like, oh, well, don't you think it's time, and the help from relatives is rarely ever helpful. So think about what you want to say. It could be something as simple as like, oh, we know you love her so much. Thank you for your concern. She's doing it at her own pace, and we're cool with that. And then you just walk away and go get yourself another glass of wine. So just kind of think about that so that you project that you're following her lead, and that your kids will pick up on that. Okay, tip number 3 is a big one. This is a huge chunk, okay? Understand the development. The reason this is so important is because so few of us were given any kind of information about what it's like to have these little humans and what's going on inside of these little humans. My undergraduate degree is in psychology and sociology with a child development focus. And when I was going to school for that, we didn't know any of this stuff about the brain and the nervous system. Everything was a very behavioral approach. Do something to extinguish the behavior, reward, consequence, that kind of thing. We know so much more now, so we can do so much better and make it so much easier. So I was giving this talk last year in person, and this dad came up to me afterwards, and he was like, lady, you might have just saved my son's life, because I was about ready to kill him. He had a 3-year-old who just kind of wasn't getting it. And the dad was thinking like, this kid is being defiant, or this kid is being stubborn, right? And he was finding himself getting really frustrated. But once he learned kind of what was going on, he was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. Like, my kid's actually totally normal and I can chill out. So the ability to successfully master toilet learning is not tied to how smart your kid is. I've heard so many parents say like, oh, we're not worried, because Johnny is so smart and he's just going to pick this up like that, no problem. And then when Johnny doesn't, they're frustrated, they're disappointed, they're ashamed, they feel like somehow they failed, or maybe he's not as smart as they thought he was, right? It's not linked to how smart they are. It's also not linked to their language development. A kid can be super verbal, have great comprehension, and still not have the ability to understand what's going on with their body and connect it to the thing they have to do in the bathroom. It's the same as a 2-year-old who's super verbal and can tell you everything in the world about trains, and then they have a meltdown because you gave them, ketchup instead of mayonnaise. But yesterday they wanted mayonnaise, so you assume yesterday they wanted ketchup, you assume they wanted ketchup, whatever. They're not logical and rational just because they're verbal. So what toilet learning success is linked to is 2 things. One is called interoception, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the other is actually physically having the skills to successfully pee and poop. So that's things like core strength. If a kid can't squeeze their core muscles and release their core muscles, they can't actually tighten any of the things that need tightening to hold in pee and poop and to let it out. So that core strength is super important. They have to be able to sit down and stand up on the potty or the toilet without using their hands every time and getting everything dirty. They have to be able to have the dexterity to pull their pants down, pull back up, do buttons, do zippers, to wipe themselves, to wash their hands, right? Independent toilet learning is so much more than just like getting to the potty in time. It takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of practice. So that physical control is super important. But interoception is amazing. It is incredibly important for humans to be successful. Interoception is the ability to feel the sensations and the conditions inside your body and to know what they mean, to put a language concept to it. And that takes a long time to develop. We know adults who don't realize they're hungry. They don't realize they're thirsty. They don't realize, oh crap, I haven't actually gone to the bathroom in 10 hours because I've been so busy working. So expecting these little children to be able to read all of their body's internal cues and have the physical control to do it takes a lot of patience on our part, right? They're little and these are big things. So the other reason why interoception is tough for little kids is because their sensory processing networks in their brain are still very much under construction. They're building those networks every second of every day with every bit of input. So if you imagine being a toddler, everything is big and loud and smelly and sometimes scary. Everything can be really overwhelming. All of these external sensations are bombarding you all the time. Trying to sift through what is an external sensation and what is an internal sensation, and then figuring out, oh, right, that internal sensation means I need to pee. Now I have to stop what I'm doing, have the physical control to hold it in until I get to the bathroom, get my clothes off, get seated, and then let it go. It's actually a really complicated process that takes a lot of practice to build. There's another layer to this as well, and that's called neuroception. Now, I could talk for days about the nervous system and links to children's behavior, but that's not what today is about. The reason that interoception and neuroception are so important for toilet learning is because neuroception means the brain is constantly seeking safety, that feeling of being safe. Of course, your kids are objectively safe with you. You love them more than anything. You would never do anything to hurt them. They are your miracles. It's not about the brain knowing it's objectively safe. It's about all their spidey senses, the nerves running through their entire body, processing all of the information, telling their brain that they feel safe. It throws back to when we were, living on the savannah and we were trying to run away from saber-toothed tigers. Our nervous system can only rest and digest when we feel safe. If we feel any kind of alarm, we go into fight or flight. Two things that apply to toilet learning. If your child's brain is in fight or flight, they can't learn and build skills. They just can't. It's not how it works. And the other thing is that when they're in fight or flight, their digestive system shut down. They literally can't poop because they need to use all of that energy and resources on other things. So this links back to shifting your mindset and being patient. If we are stressed out about our child's toilet learning process, we are giving off that energy. We are showing that stress in our facial expressions, the tone of our voice, our body language, the words we use. Our stress is radiating off of us. Our frustration is radiating off of us. And what that means for their little brains, they are taking all of that in and they are going into fight or flight. And when they are in fight or flight, that is when you see the kicking, the screaming, the running away, the biting, the absolute refusal to use the toilet or the potty in any capacity. So if they associate toilet learning as something they're being forced to do, their brain is going to feel unsafe. If they don't have autonomy in the process, their brain is going to feel unsafe. So all of that, even when they are objectively safe, and even when you have their best interest at heart, adds up to just making the process harder on everybody and taking way longer. So you actually have a vested interest in looking at it as a process and being patient and just allowing it to kind of happen as it happens. There's another key piece to this, especially for poop, because in addition to the body sending these signals to the brain about whether or not it's safe, the brain is also a prediction-making machine. So if children start to associate negative things with the bathroom, right? If they start knowing that when they come home from daycare and they've got a little bag with them, that means that they've wet themselves, and their dad is going to say, oh, did you have an accident? They're gearing up for that negative experience. Their brain starts to predict that when they come home, that's what's going to happen. If they, didn't make it to the toilet at school and they pooped themselves and the teacher sent an email, and the first thing that, the parent says to the child when they pick them up is, we've talked about this, you have to go poo-poo on the toilet. The child's brain starts to proactively predict that there is something negative coming, which sends them into fight or flight, which stops their digestion process, which means they legitimately can't poop, right? If you think about adults, okay, how many of the people watching this don't poop at work? Because at work, they can't just take their phone and disappear into a private bathroom for 20 minutes and no one's going to notice, right? There's stalls or there's, other people nearby. How many people watching this don't poop for the first 2 days that you're on vacation because you're in a different hotel room, it's a different bathroom, and your body's like, nope, not safe, not doing this. Once it starts to feel like home, then you can relax and let it go, right? It's exactly the same for kids. And so putting the pressure on them, even gentle pressure, like, oh, just give it a try, it's going to make mommy so happy, it can get their brain thinking that this is a negative thing. As a little side note, up to 30% of children in the US have functional constipation at some point during their early years. That is a huge number of kids. Now, that is not related to a disease or related to a disorder. That's functional constipation. That's something that is as a result of children withholding or their system not allowing them to release because of external pressures. So that's a lot of kids. And so that also suggests that there's a better way that we can be doing this to take the pressure off of everybody. There's one more developmental piece I want to mention before moving on to how we actually do the toilet learning, and that is body budgets. Okay, body budgets are my favorite. Anyone who knows me knows I could talk about them forever. I've got a couple friends who signed up for this, and so they already know that I do talk about body budgets all the time. A body budget is essentially the way that your brain and nervous system allocate resources. And it's also how much space your nervous system has to be resilient, to adapt, to be flexible. So things that deplete the body budget are being tired, being hungry, being thirsty, needing to pee and not having access to a bathroom, being constipated. Things like focusing your attention for a really long time, or being at work and having to be nice to people even when you want to tell them to just shove off. Or if you're a kid and you're on the playground and you have to be nice to the other kids, even though you just want to push them in the sandbox because they're being mean. All of those things tax your body budget. But there's other stuff too. All that sensory input that I talked about. So the lights being too bright, sounds being too loud, the buzzing of fluorescent lights in a classroom or a daycare, the feeling of your clothing on your skin, all of those sensations take resources away. Your brain and your nervous system are constantly figuring out where to shift things so that you can be ready for fight or flight if need be, or so that you can relax into rest and digest. So imagine that you're 2 years old and you don't really have a prefrontal cortex yet. So you melt down a lot. That's pretty exhausting, pretty taxing on your body budget. And there's all these grownups who are bigger than you, and they are telling you what to do and where to go and when to do it. And if you don't physically do the thing they ask you to do, they'll pick you up and move you, or they'll make a grumpy face, or they'll withhold their affection and they won't want to play with you, or they'll put you in a timeout. And now they're asking you to sit down on this toilet and they're mad at you when your body's not doing the thing that they want you to do, or you didn't get the candy that you thought you were going to get because you sat down and it didn't work. All of that puts their little nervous systems into fight or flight. It also means then that they're not sleeping very well, which means that they're cranky and you're cranky. And so keeping body budgets as balanced as possible is a key to toilet learning success, making sure everybody's getting enough sleep, nutrition, hydration. But also, this is key, lots of affection and snuggling and touch and play and rough and tumble play and lots of connection and laughter. Really, really, really good for your relationship with the kids, but also that puts their nervous systems into that rest and digest, which is where you want it to be for them to successfully be able to toilet. So one more piece about development. Neurodiversity adds additional considerations. Okay, so autistic kids, kids with ADHD, kids with sensory processing challenges, that makes this process a lot harder, right? If you've got a sensory processing challenge, which often does come along with autism or ADHD, all of a sudden, the world is coming at you in really big, loud, scary ways. It is even harder to discern what is happening with your own interoception when all of that is going on. Compounding that, many kids who have sensory challenges or for whom sensations feel really big, often they're selective eaters. So they're maybe not getting as much fiber, they're maybe not getting as much liquid. So all of that can combine to make this process a lot harder. So in those circumstances, give yourselves even more grace and even more permission. By all means, consult with a pediatrician. Occupational therapists are amazing, especially ones who are trained in interoception. They can help to cue your child in and to help you help your child cue into all of those sensations. But the biggest thing there is that it's likely just going to take longer. So as long as the toilet learning process is moving in the right direction, doesn't matter how long it takes. There are many children for whom not even starting till age 5 is more realistic. And so rather than fighting it, just accept it, embrace the kid you have, love the kid you have, and work with the developmental pace that they're on, because that way you're going to protect the relationship and you're going to help them build those skills. So we've talked about how to protect the relationship during the toilet learning process, and we've talked about scaling your expectations to match their development. But what about skill building? Like, how do we actually do the thing? What does the toilet learning thing actually look like? If you're purchasing a book about toilet training or a program about toilet training, typically, like, this is the point they start at. They don't add in the developmental pieces and the relational pieces because they're looking at, like, how do I just get the kid to do the thing on the toilet and get them out of diapers? All the stuff that comes before is so, so, so important, because toilet learning starts long before they're actually out of diapers, long before there's even a potty in your house. The process starts when they're infants, right? In the same way that the learning process for language starts when they are infants, even before they're born, when they're in utero. Walking, self-feeding, they all begin when they're infants, right? And the best part is when you look at this as a process of learning, they stay in diapers while you're doing it. So you don't have to worry about your furniture. You don't have to worry about the car seat. You're not tied to the house for 6 months because they're out of diapers and you're trying to gently encourage them to use the toilet. So the toilet learning process starts long before they're actually out of diapers, out of diapers. And it can take 6 months, it can take a year, it can take 2 years. But again, they're still in diapers while all this preliminary stuff is happening. So tip number 4 is focus on their physical preparation. Remember how we said that the physical skill of being able to, like, tighten their abdomen and sphincters and all of that is super, super important? Spend a ton of time doing tummy time with your kiddos, letting them crawl, encouraging them to climb. All of that play, all of that really physical movement play is building their physical ability to actually be successful at using the toilet when they're ready. They have to be really steady on their feet, right? They have to have that core strength. They also have to be able to like get down and up, right? Like sitting on a potty is like a little toddler squat. So when you see them, sitting in that yogi squat position, that's awesome. When they can get up and down, they're strengthening everything they need to successfully use the toilet. Okay. They need muscle control for their bladder and their bowels. There is a point at which you feel like you're putting your baby to bed and they're waking up the next morning as a toddler. They're suddenly so much more steady on their feet, and their little chubby faces start to lean out and their little rolls start to disappear. And they just go from being baby to being toddler. And it feels like it happens like that. That is the point at which they are ready to start more actively engaging in a toilet learning process. For some kids, that happens around 14, 15 months. For other kids, it doesn't happen until they're 2. That's okay. The age is irrelevant. The important thing is waiting until they're ready to actually ditch the diapers. So another consideration in this is if your child has a physical disability or a developmental disability, consult your pediatrician, occupational therapist, pediatric physical therapist, because there will be other things that you need to do to strengthen all of those muscles, or they may need a different type of toileting altogether. So again, it's about the kid you have and about the process they are on, as opposed to sort of preconceived social media-led notions of how the process should look. Tip number 5 is that language matters. This starts when they are infants on the changing table, right? When you're cooing to them and you're zubbering their little belly and you're saying, oh, let's get you out of that wet diaper. Let's get you into something dry and comfy, cozy. Oh, doesn't that feel better? You are cueing them to the fact that when their diaper is wet, it is not comfortable. When their diaper has poop in it, it is not comfortable. That it feels better to be clean and dry. So that's part of it. Part of that extends into just normalizing how you talk about it in the house. This type of modeling goes for any of the internal processes that we do as adults without saying it. When you've got little kids around, saying things like, oh, my tummy feels a bit rumbly. I think I should try go poop. Or, oh, we're going on a long car ride. I'm going to go pee before I get in the car. It sounds silly, but those simple little things over time normalize talking about it, but they also cue the kids in to thinking about, oh, my tummy's rumbly. Do I need to go poop too? That kind of thing. Once they're out of diapers, the language actually matters even more. When we say things to them like, did you have an accident? It immediately places blame on them. We are immediately creating a sense of shame. If you say something like, oh, you're wet, let's go get you cleaned up. It's very matter of fact, right? Yes, they are wet. They did not have an accident. They're just wet, right? It's tough to catch ourselves, but it's super, super important because we talked about earlier, any shame, any blame, any guilt is going to send that little brain into fight or flight. And we want to prevent that from happening so that the process stays really smooth. So fast forward a little bit, they've independently mastered the toilet, and don't worry, we will go back and talk about how they get there. But the language keeps mattering then too, because there are going to be points in time where you thought it was mastered and you noticed that there was a bit of a regression. This happens when they go through a growth spurt, right? They're sleeping really deeply and all of a sudden they're peeing themselves at night. Or they're playing and they're doing something so interesting that they just don't want to stop and they miscalculated and they ended up, wetting their pants before they make it to the bathroom. Emotional upsets, right? Illness, death in the family, a big move, a new sibling, all of these things can throw off their body's systems. So if they do wet themselves, instead of saying like, oh, did you have an accident? You haven't done that in 2 years. What's going on? Just say, oh, I noticed that you're wet. Can you take care of that yourself, or would you like me to help you? Right? You're giving them autonomy, you're giving them respect, and you're giving them the support that they need. And again, how you talk about it through the whole learning process changes how you think about it, and that changes how you feel about it. And then their little mirror neurons pick up on that, and they feel calm and relaxed as well. So fast forwarding back, rewinding back to before they're ready to ditch the diapers. Okay, so tip number 6 is to get in the mindset of bathroom things happen in the bathroom. So now you've got this kiddo who's still in diapers, you're going through the learning process, but they're starting to get really steady on their feet. They're starting, you can sense that like a change is coming. Move the diaper changing process into the bathroom too. You can do this on the floor. This is also the stage where a lot of kids start to really fight you on diaper changing. And that is often because it feels unsafe to be laying down and having this adult like looming over you and doing these things to you. Their brain sends off signals like, hold on a second, where is my autonomy? Where is my control? Why is this happening to me all the time? A lot of those kids calm right down if you change them standing up. So bring the diaper changing things into the bathroom. Get things set up as independently as possible so your little human can stand. They can hand you the wipes. They can hand you the clean diaper. Together, you can dump the poop into the toilet and flush. And it starts to get them in the process of bathroom things happen in the bathroom, poop goes in the toilet, and we flush. And then you wash your hands, and out you go. Okay? Another part of the process goes back to the language where you'll say like, yeah, your diaper's wet because you peed, or your diaper's dirty because you pooped, right? I'm going to help you get cleaned up so you feel fresh again. Someday when you're ready, you're going to do this by yourself. And that's a really lovely way to do it, is someday when you're ready, someday when you're ready. Because that doesn't mean on your 3rd birthday or when I decide that you're ready. It's just someday when you're ready. Adding a potty into the environment. So they're still in diapers at this point. Your furniture's still protected. You can still go on family vacations, but you're noticing that they're ready to start maybe, adding in this part of the process. I love a potty instead of a little seat on a toilet. Some of the reasons for that are you can put the potty in the bathroom, right, beside the toilet. They can come in and sit on it while you're on the toilet, right? They're going to be in the bathroom with you anyway. So if they're following you in, they might as well sit down with a book or their stuffed animal and get used to the sitting down. And like, don't look at me like that. You know that teddy bear has been in grosser places. So don't even. So get them used to just sitting on the potty with their clothes on, sitting on the potty with their diaper on, or peeing and pooping in their diaper while they're sitting on the potty. Again, this is just part of the learning process. They're still in diapers with no expectation that they're going to take it off and use it. They might show you that they want to take their diaper off and use the potty. Awesome. Call it a win. Don't expect it every time. It doesn't mean that once it's happened, they're never going back to using a diaper. Anytime throughout this process, a child might just say like, I'm done. Thank you very much. Right? Those are the stories of the kids who kind of train themselves. It's rare, but it does happen, right? At any point in the process, you can change how you're doing this. It gives you tons of flexibility, leaves lots of room for mistakes because you don't have to follow a script, right? That potty might sit there for 6 months or a year or longer, right? But it's there. Their nervous system doesn't fire up when they see it. The potty can go in the car. The potty can go in the backyard, right? You can change rooms with the potty if you are doing something. Let's say you're nursing your newborn. You can bring the potty to the living room. I know I said the mindset of bathroom things go in the bathroom. However, you have to shift as your needs change, as your family changes, right? Potties are also great for pooping because when a child sits down on a potty, they can sit right down. They don't have to climb up a little step stool and then turn themselves around and then get themselves settled on the little inner child toilet seat. So it's much more stable. Plus, when their feet are flat on the ground, it gives them something to brace down on when they're pooping. It's also a better angle for their body to actually release feces. With a step stool or something in front of the toilet, if it's a little too low, they can't really brace their feet on it. The other thing is if they're on a toilet and they poop and the poop splashes down and the cold water splashes up, oy, that trauma. it doesn't feel good for little kids. So a potty that doesn't have water in it is often a lot less scary because we said the brain predicts, right? So if that happens even one time, their little brain is going to go into overdrive every time you ask them to sit down on the toilet and try pooping. So they're still in diapers, right? The learning process involves their physical preparation, how you talk about it, inviting them to come and sit, have them be as independent and involved in the process as possible, right? If they're pooping in their diaper but sitting on the potty, like I said, they dump it in the toilet, they hand you the wipes, kind of hand you the clean diaper, helping out with those sorts of things, and then gradually start making it part of the routine, right? When they get up in the morning, we go sit on the potty. Nothing happens, that's cool. We just go sit on the potty. After lunch, we go sit on the potty, or before a nap, we go sit on the potty. Before bed, we go sit on the potty. It just becomes part of the routine. Even if nothing happens, it's a great way to get that routine going. There are some toilet training methods that say that getting them into a routine doesn't allow them the opportunity to learn their own body's cues. And while, I don't disagree with that, we also know the brain is predictive. So by getting into a routine of, I get up in the morning and I go sit on the potty. I go sit on the potty before I have lunch, or I go sit on the potty after lunch before my nap. The body starts to predict what is coming, and that can help set up that rest and digest and get the digestive tract going. It's like the person who doesn't poop in the office. When they're driving up the street to their house, they can feel it starting to rumble because they know they're about to be home. Same kind of thing, right? You can set that routine up. And also, if you're trying to get into the routine, it's more likely they're going to poop after a meal because that fires up the digestive tract. So now, tip number 7 is how to know when they're ready to ditch the diapers. The learning process could take several months. It could take a year. It could take 18 months. But remember, super low stress because you're still in diapers, right? So you don't have to not go to those family events and not take that vacation. You can just relax and go through the learning process. Some kids are going to pick it up right away. Like I said, they're just going to be like, no, thanks, mommy. I'm done with diapers. This was lovely. No more. Some kids, like I said, are still going to want to pull up when it's time to poop. That's cool too. There's no right or wrong way to do this, except for ways that damage their relational safety. As long as you are protecting their relationship and following their development, there's no wrong way to do it. You can start to tell when they're ready to ditch the diaper because they're waking up dry more often. They're waking up from their nap dry. They're like following you into the bathroom and they're actually sitting down and peeing on the potty when you're using the toilet. They're super interested in it, right? They've got their diapers are dry for a couple hours during the day. All of those things kind of add up. You will get a sense. Trust your instincts. This is the hardest thing for parents because there's so much misinformation and stress and shame and blame. You will know if you've been trusting this process, you're going to know when it's time to start ditching the diapers and moving them into underwear. There's no harm in the pre-underwear learning process taking longer because once you switch to underwear, you are limited in your geographic mobility for a while. It's really hard to get on a plane, switch your kid back to diapers and get on a plane or go on those long car rides. So if you want to wait to actually ditch the diapers until summer when there's less clothing to take on and off, that's okay. You can still keep doing all the other steps in the learning process and keep them in a diaper, right? It has to work for your family. That's the other most important piece because if you're forcing it in a way that doesn't work, if you're about to have another baby, that is not the time to switch to underwear, right? It has to work for your family. So when you switch to underwear, I strongly recommend that you use the really thick training pants. You can buy them at Target or Walmart because if they're wearing their super cute Elsa underwear or their super cute Spider-Man underwear, the cloth is so thin that if they have even a dribble of pee, they're going to feel like they actually failed and they're just going to release and it's all going to come out. With those thick training pants, a dribble or two gives them the cue, oh, I need to go pee. But it gives them time to actually get to the potty or the toilet. without a tsunami arriving on the floor and their pants being wet and their socks being wet and them feeling like they failed and you trying to hide your frustration because you have to clean them up again. There are some programs that suggest that they should run around naked the first however long that they're in this process. And again, for some kids, that works. But here's some of the challenges with that. One of those challenges is for some children, they don't feel safe running around naked. It's too cold or it's too much air on their skin. For tiny children with penises, that kind of swinging around doesn't feel good. When you're used to being cozy in a diaper and cozy in your pants, all of a sudden, not having that kind of proprioceptive feedback on your skin can send a signal to your brain that something's unsafe, and then they go into fight or flight, right? Another issue with the running around naked is we talked earlier about how their nervous systems need a lot of play, a lot of affection, a lot of touch, a lot of snuggling, a lot of laughter. You are naturally less likely to be wrestling with your naked toddler because there's a pretty good chance you're going to get peed on. So you're changing how you interact with them in subtle ways while they're running around naked. You're changing their routine. You're limiting where you go. You're limiting which rooms in the house they can be in. So many factors change in order to facilitate them being naked in the house. That can send their brain into, wait a second, something super different. This doesn't feel safe. And then they go into that fight or flight. So while they do work for some kids, and if it's working for you, amazing. If you found a way that works for you and that works for all of your kids, amazing, do that thing. But just be mindful that if it doesn't work, it's not because you're doing it wrong, and it's not because there's anything wrong with your kid. It's just not working for their little nervous system. There's also, I mean, we've all heard it, right? Everybody's grandma says, well, I just let them pee down their leg and they didn't like that feeling and that's how they learned. You're making a huge assumption there that this kid can connect. Ooh, I really don't like this feeling dripping down my leg. Ooh, this makes me angry. Ooh, I'm crying. Brain is in fight or flight, right? No learning can happen. No skill building can happen. You're expecting them to be able to tell, okay, if I don't want that feeling to happen again, I have to learn what it feels like inside my body when it's time to pee. And then I have to hold it in with my tiny little underdeveloped bladder control muscles. And then I have to get all the way to the bathroom before I can release it. And I have to do all of that while my brain is freaking out because it doesn't want the feeling of pee on my leg to happen again. That's a lot for a tiny little brain and a tiny little body. So, if you choose to use that method, by all means, whatever's working for your family, my preference would be to put them in the thick underwear. And again, no like fancy tutus. This is not the time for dress up clothes that they can't get in and out of on their own. You want them to be in like track pants or maybe just the underwear, whatever, something that is easy for them to be as independent as possible, but still for them to feel really safe. When you are actively starting the underwear phase, you are going to want to avoid those long car rides, those vacations. There's during the initial learning phase while they're still in a diaper, all those things are no problem. But once you've actually switched to underwear, you do need to give it some time so that they can be at home or someplace with access to a bathroom where they feel safe, or bring the potty with you, just to set them up for success and to, limit the amount of laundry that you need to do. A couple little tips. Put a doggy pee pad in the bottom of the car seat. It's thin enough that it's not going to impact their safety, but it will save you from so many messes because we all know how incredibly difficult car seats are to clean. With boys, start them sitting down. I know it's super fun. If there's a daddy in their life who wants to show them how to pee standing up, it's an awesome skill to have. But when they're learning, they're also trying to learn to control their bowels and their bladder. So there's a really good chance, not only are they going to have terrible aim if they pee while they're standing up, they're also going to poop at the same time. So start them sitting down. Once they've mastered that, then, you can have some fun with it, throw a Cheerio or a Fruit Loop in the toilet, give them a target to aim at. But I really do encourage you to start them with sitting down. For Nighttime. Nighttime continence takes longer than daytime, especially if they're a heavy sleeper. So if they're in underwear all day with great success, and they're still in a pull-up at night, no problem. Especially if they're still in a crib. If you've got a wanderer and you want to make sure that they're safe, putting them in underwear at night is pretty unfair because they can't get up and go to the bathroom. Or they're going to be screaming for you to come in and get them because they have to pee and they don't want to wet their bed. So by all means, if they're still in a crib, keep them in a pull-up. And just don't feel badly if they're dry during the day and they need to pull up at night. Once you're noticing that their pull up is dry every morning for an extended period of time, then sure, if they're ready and willing, you can put them in the underwear at night too. One more little bit about keeping them in their underwear is if you've been doing this for a while and it's not working and they're upset and you're frustrated, just stop. There's absolutely no harm in stopping, regrouping, and just saying, you'll use your underwear when you're ready. We're going to switch back to diapers. No worries. Okay. So I've got a couple more tips that are short. We started a few minutes late, so we're not at the hour mark yet. So if you're able to hang in there live so you can get your questions answered, that would be awesome. And if not, by all means, I'm going to be sending out the replay. So tip number 8, independence is key. Okay, set up their space so they can wipe themselves, they can change themselves, they know where to put their wet things with as little assistance as possible. Dress them in things that are easy for them to put on and take off. Ask them if they want you to stay in the bathroom with them or if they want you to wait outside, right? It's a respectful thing to do. Choices are super important for their autonomy. If you say to them, do you need to go pee? And they say no. Or if you say, do you want to go pee? And they say no. You've given them a choice, so you have to respect that. A different kind of choice is, oh, it's time to go use the potty. Do you want to walk to the bathroom or fly to the bathroom? You're making it playful. The more playful it is, the more likely they're going to go along with it, and the calmer their nervous system is going to stay during the process. It also, when you're laughing and giggling with your toddler, it's much easier to stay calm and happy with them as well. When you're teaching kids to wipe, especially little girls, wipe front to back. Getting feces in the vulva, in the vagina, in the urethra leads to UTIs and yeast infections and all sorts of nasty things. So teaching them to wipe front to back. Invest in the good toilet paper. I know this seems counterintuitive because you think to yourself, like, they're just going to waste it anyway. But that thin one-ply toilet paper on little hands that are learning to wipe little bums, everybody's going to be covered all the time. Invest in the good toilet paper, but pull off just 2 or 3 squares. You can even, if they want to wipe themselves, you can put the squares aside for them ahead of time. Of course, you want to avoid them running it all into the toilet, but the good toilet paper is actually going to be softer on their bottom, and it's going to get them more success at being independent. And then get them in the habit of washing their hands every time. A trick that I've often used with kids is making bubble gloves. When they don't want to wash their hands, you say, let's make those bubble gloves. And then their hands are covered in bubbles, and then they rinse it off and down the sink it goes. Tip number 9 is supporting their autonomy by avoiding rewards and sticker charts and that kind of thing. Even excessive praise becomes a reward. When there is a reward for going to the bathroom, it means that you are controlling their body's processes. If you want your kids to become teenagers who understand consent and who have bodily autonomy, rewarding them for doing a bodily function on your schedule sets a precedent that isn't great. The unspoken assumption there too is if they didn't earn the treat or they didn't earn the sticker or they didn't earn the praise, somehow they have failed. So the absence of reward becomes an unintentional punishment. You can acknowledge it verbally. You can say something like, hey, you used the toilet just like mommy, or you made it. I can see you were listening to your body. Your tone of voice there, more than what you're saying, is what gives them that positive feedback. They know that, that they've done well. If you make a big celebration out of it, then the next time that they don't make it to the toilet, the next time they do poop in their underwear, they're going to feel like they've totally failed you. The exception to this is if your child has a particular set of special needs and you are working with an occupational therapist, for example, they may, under very narrow circumstances, suggest some sort of token economy in order to enable that success. But again, in a typical situation, the rewarding backfires. All right, last tip. And this is a big one because I know how frustrating it is for so many parents. Pee happens faster than poop. Simple as that. There are lots of reasons for it, but the bottom line is that any kind of pressure from an adult is going to work against your goals. So know the signs, know your kid's tells of what, a bowel movement is coming, so you can try and get them there and kind of work with the body instead of working against it. If you see them squatting or hiding behind furniture, I had one little one who used to hide behind the curtains whenever she was pooping. If they get that poop face, right? They all have a poop face, get them to the potty. But if they're fighting you, if they're upset, if they're crying, any of those things, just stop, right? If you've got a kiddo who's willing to sit, have them try just for a couple minutes. You can sit beside them, give them a book, but no more than that, because you don't want any straining or anything like that. I had one little guy when I was a Montessori teacher, and his tell was that he would kind of crop dust through the classroom. So I would smell his brand and know that it was coming, and I'd take his little hand and I'd walk him to the bathroom that was right in the classroom, and he'd sit down and I'd just listen at the door while I was watching the other kids, and he'd say, "It's not working, it's not working." And I'd say, "Okay, you tried, thanks so much." Get him cleaned up, put his pull-up back on, and he would poop. And this happened like over and over and over again. Clean him up, off we go. So one day, "It's not working, it's not working." Plop. "It's working, it's working." And after that, he was so excited, he was out of pull-ups forever. So if you can get them to feel safe and feel encouraged, and to give it a try, awesome. But if they're fighting it, stop. Because the damage that's doing to your relationship with them, the damage that's doing to their how they process the experience, you're just slowing it down even longer than if you had just kind of backed off in the first place. They will get there. They absolutely will get there. They will not be sitting in their dorm room in a pull-up, okay? I know I mentioned this before, but there were some kiddos who are completely pee proficient, and they need a pull-up handed to them. They poop in the pull-up, you take it to the bathroom, you dump it in the toilet, and that's it. That's all they need. And that's totally fine. The fact that they even know their cues to ask for a pull-up, amazing, right? They're in underwear the rest of the time, except for when they need to poop. Don't sweat it, call it a win, right? Because any pressure you add, any celebration when they do use the toilet is going to backfire in the long run. So just to close out, right? If we as adults are telling ourselves, they know better, they've used the toilet once before, they did it last week, they should be able to do this, they're just being difficult. When that is the lens through which you are viewing them, it's reflected in our voices, it's reflected in our facial expression, it's reflected in our posture, and all of that sends their brain into fight or flight. And if we switch our perspective to they're little and they're learning, then it keeps us in a place of empathy and of patience. So there are so many other things that we could have talked about today. And, I when I'm coaching, one-on-one with families, obviously we get into the specifics of your situation, the layout of your house, the routine of your day, how many other siblings there are, all the things come into it. But I hope that this leaves you with a little bit more optimism and a little bit more information about the toilet learning process. The key takeaways, whether it's toilet learning, whether it's school success, whether it's an adolescent who's driving you nuts, the key takeaways are always protect the relationship, scale your expectations to match their development, and skill build. So how you approach toilet learning is good practice for how you approach the rest of parenting in general, to have those lifelong strong relationships that set everyone up for success. If you are interested in learning more, or if you have specific considerations in your family and you would like some one-on-one coaching, you can email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. And I'm also going to put it in, it's Kate at guidedparentingsupport.com. I'm also going to email everyone the replay and that little tip sheet that I mentioned. But I also have an ask of you, if you wouldn't mind. If you enjoyed today, if you learned something today, or if you simply were not bored to tears today, if you would be willing to send a brief little review to that email address, kate@guidedparentingsupport.com, it would be really wonderful. I'd be grateful because the words of parents that I have helped in some way mean so much more than any marketing that I could ever pay for. Please indicate if you'd like your review to be anonymous. The most I would use would be your first name or just your initials. Typically, when clients send testimonials, I simply say parents of a 14, 17, and 19-year-old, and leave it very anonymous because parenting is so personal that I never want to break anyone's trust. Also, if you have any feedback for how it could have been better, I will graciously accept that too. So thank you so much for your time. If you are watching this on the replay, I hope that you enjoyed, and I'd love to get those emails from you as well. I'm going to turn off the recording now to respect everyone's privacy during questions. So thank you again, and good luck.